So, thanks, Brian. Really tough act to follow. Tom, if I knew I was going after your dad, I probably would have said no. But anyway, so first and foremost, I wanted to thank my unwitting adopting parents, Mr. and Mrs. Carroll, and my newly adopted in-laws, Mr. and Mrs. Menner, for hosting us all this evening. To be here with so many amazing people from Tom and Morgan's lives is truly a blessing. So I think I speak for everybody when I say that we're indescribably excited for what this weekend has in store. Tim, just try to remember. Second, I'd like to briefly address Tom and the Groomsman directly. As you guys can see, I prepared my remarks for tonight.
Good job, man.
So, thank you. Despite the fateful roast of 2022, I'd like to think that I'm coming back stronger than ever, and I'm relatively sober, so I've got that going. Thank you. For those who don't know me, my name is Ben Potter. Tom and I have been best friends for almost 20 years now, which means I've been terrorizing Brian and Michelle for at least that long as well. No matter what Tom and Tim and I seem to get into, Annie was always the best of all of us. Mr. and Mrs. Carroll always seemed to love us. And to be fair, they had to love Tom and Tim. I think they just felt so bad for me that they let me keep coming back. So when Tom and Morgan asked me to speak at their rehearsal dinner, I was kind of at a loss for where to begin, because how do you kind of recap, unless you're Mr. Carroll, who's obviously the greatest orator in the room, how do you recap, a 20-year friendship, right? Tom and I have been an item for essentially two-thirds of my life. And I don't really remember exactly where it all began, but I remember one specific circumstance of our newly budded friendship in Mr. Kavanaugh's English class that I'd like to share with everyone tonight. So Tom and I were embroiled in a conversation that 110% could have waited until after class was over. Clearly frustrated with our flagrant disrespect, Mr. Kavanaugh, and anyone that went to Lincoln High School knows who I'm talking about, put his hands firmly and quite sassily on his hips, just kind of paused for a second and gave us this 1,000-watt psycho smile and said, "Mr. Carroll and Mr. Potter, when you guys are done, let me know and I'll resume my class." And so at this point, Tom's turned around, he's talking to me, his back is to the class. And Tom he turns back around and he goes, "All right, 1 minute." And then he turns back around and he continues his conversation with me, and I'm flabbergasted. And Mr. Kavanaugh, I think, is equally so. But at that point, I knew that Tom and I were going to be a force to be reckoned with. Tom was always the yin to my yang, right? He's a strong, extremely affable, just extremely comedic person, right? Whereas sometimes I'm a little bit more reserved, so we've always complimented each other in that way. And I think Tom standing up to Mr. Kavanaugh and saying, "You know what, your class will go on when I'm done." I was like, wow, this is a guy I need in my life. So from that point on, again, I knew that Tom and I were going to be a force to be reckoned with. So as the years went by, middle school turned into high school, and Tom and I did a lot of stuff together. Everything from journalism, variety show, football, where, for the record, despite what anybody has heard, I was the all-star and Tom rolled the bench. All right? If you've ever heard the leg of Lincoln, look it up. That was me. Road trips down to Palatka, Florida, right? Trips that we'll never forget. And even similar ankle breaks that we were both told were not broken because, and I quote, "the bone was not sticking out of the skin," per Michelle's guidance. So high school ended, we graduated. I promptly blacked out at Tom's graduation party, and I fell off his deck, and Michelle not so kindly asked me to go home. So some things never change. But love is love. She still loves me to this day. I know that to be true. So high school led to college, and the usual hijinks ensued. Despite the growing distance between Tom and I, not much really changed. I was at Bryant, he was in Boston at Emerson. First at Assumption, R.I.P. Roger, and then at Emerson. We visited each other frequently, probably partied a little too hard sometimes, and I was seemingly always the guy that could be found lugging furniture up to an inconveniently accessible apartment every single time Tom tried to move. And it was usually me and Brian, and Tim was miraculously nowhere to be found. Ever. I moved Tim in too, by the way. So, At any rate, my life changed, of course, towards the end of college when I met my wife, Haley, who is now my wife. Tom and I were both seniors, and Tom was the first person, and Tim and Tom will echo it to the rooftops. The version of me with Haley was instantaneously lauded as the version, so much better than the version without. So Tom kind of slapped me upside the head and he said, "Don't be an idiot and don't mess this up." And so I didn't.
Sometimes. It depends on the day.
Depends on the day. I'm doing okay right now. So after college is really when Tom's path and my path started to diverge for really the first time in our friendship. He moved at what seemed like a pace of once a year to a new city, a new town no one had ever heard of, for an even better job, right? And that's one of the things that has always amazed me about Tom is that he's just he's a workhorse, right? He's so dedicated at what he does. He's meticulous in his execution of his job, in the curation of his friendships, right? Tom gives 110% to every single thing that he does, and that's one of the things I love about him the most. So it was no surprise to me when life took him from Boston to Avon, Connecticut, and then finally to St. Louis. Cheers for St. Louis.
All right. Go Blues!
That's where the story turns. So Tom and I didn't get to see each other a lot, but when we did talk, and we talked on the phone frequently, we always keep each other abreast of kind of what was going on in our lives and everything else. So Tom had been in St. Louis for a little bit, and that was when I got what I describe as the call. So it was August of 2019. Tom calls me after a date, and I can tell that he is smitten, right? Something's different. Tom and I don't talk about our emotions a lot. But he excitedly brings me through all the pertinent details of a date that he was just on. Who this girl is, where she's from, how they met, what they talked about, when they were meeting next. I mean, we must have talked an hour and a half alone about this particular topic, which was just an anomaly for Tom and I, right? Usually he's talking to me about different things happening in his life and sports, which I don't really care about, and so this was kind of new for us. But when we hung up, I turned to Haley and I said, "I think Tom's got a girlfriend. I don't think it's just a girlfriend either. I think this is pretty serious." So that date, of course, was with you, Morgan, your first date. And since the moment that you stepped into Tom's life, you've made him happier than anyone or anything I've ever seen before. Watching the impact that your love and your strength and your personality and your grace have had on Tom's life has been a thing of absolute beauty. Even more beautiful has been the opportunity to watch you both grow in your love as a couple, right? Taking on challenge after challenge, major life event after major life event, all with relative ease, right? I mean, I truly look at both of you and I wonder how you've handled it all, right? Everything from getting engaged, moving back to the East Coast, closing on a house in an unlisted sale, getting a puppy, and planning a beautiful wedding with people coming from so many different states and areas. There's truly nothing, in my opinion, that you guys cannot do together. And so when I thought back and how does somebody deal with all of that at once? The answer was simple, because you had each other. And that's all you ever needed, right? So that's the secret formula, right? You guys are perfect for each other, and there's no doubt in my mind. So I'll close with this. Morgan, for most of my life, I've been lucky enough to consider Tom and the Carrolls my family. Sometimes more family than my own family, so it really means a lot. This weekend, officially, I'm beyond blessed to include you and your beautiful, amazing family into that fold. And I just personally want to thank you for being such an amazing person, an amazing fiance, an amazing soon-to-be wife, and the best friend to my brother. So cheers to you guys.